Now, 4-hour humanitarian pauses are expected to be implemented by Israel today in areas of northern Gaza. That's to allow civilians to escape. But there's no sign yet of a let-up in fighting, with Israel launching a huge overnight bombardment against Gaza. World leaders and diplomats have gathered for the Paris Peace Forum to discuss the urgent need for humanitarian aid in Gaza. Well, the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, is at the summit and he joins us now. Thank you for speaking to us, Mr. Michel, on Sky News. These humanitarian pauses are expected to begin today. Is that still the case as far as you know?
It is very important that Israel announced the decision to organize some pauses every day. Probably this is not enough, but you know that the European Council is calling for pauses for humanitarian corridors, because we know how this is important to make sure that humanitarian aid is provided to people in need in Gaza.
But as far as you know, that is still being planned for today. Are the humanitarian pauses enough to alleviate the civilian casualties and suffering?
Probably this is not enough, but this is a first step, and an important first step. And you know that for days we were calling the European Union, together with other partners, for humanitarian pauses, for humanitarian corridors. Is my first point. Yesterday in Paris, with many leaders coming from across the world, we made a decision to increase our humanitarian support for the people in Gaza. But there is one serious challenge. We need to make sure that this humanitarian aid is delivered to the people in need. And there are very concrete logistical difficulties on the one hand, but on the other hand, this is a first step announced today or yesterday by the government of Israel.
The figures that are coming out from the Gaza Health Ministry, more than 10,000 people killed, a significant proportion of them children. Do you believe those figures? Do you think that they underreport the number of people killed? And if you believe those figures, is it proportionate?
This is absolutely certain that I believe the figures used by the United Nations and by United Nations agency, because they have the expertise, they have some knowledge. And yesterday, the head of the United Nations Agency for the Refugees in Gaza told us that about 100 humanitarian workers have been killed in Gaza. It means this is very important to recall that Israel has the right to defend itself, but it must be done in accordance with the humanitarian law. There cannot be double standards. I sincerely hope that as soon as possible it will be possible to deliver humanitarian aid, point one, and that it will be possible also to engage in a political process with all the leaders in the region. And the two-state solution will be the best guarantee for more stability, for more security, for the people in Israel, for the people of Palestine, and for the people in the region.
Do you believe that war crimes have been committed by both sides?
This is not my responsibility to qualify, but it's absolutely certain, for instance, that what has been done by Hamas is a war crime. This is very clear, that this terrorist attack cannot and can never be justified. Is one first element. And on the other side, we are doing everything with Israel to convince Israel to respect the international humanitarian law. I made public several times the recent days that a total siege is always in contradiction with the international law. And that's why we are advocating, that's why we are trying to convince the government of Israel. A few days ago, I had a phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu, and on behalf of the European Union, I expressed our political position, try to convince that the respect for the humanitarian law is not only a moral duty, this is also a strategic duty. This is very important to respect the fundamental principle based on human dignity, point one. But on the other hand, it's also important to make it very clear that we respect our societies in Europe, in the Arab countries, who every day can see the terrible images of this humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza.
So let me ask you again, do you believe that more than 10,000 people killed, Palestinians killed in Gaza, is that proportionate?
Look, in terms of qualification is it in line with the international law? It's not my responsibility to make this assessment today, but it's very important to make sure that the humanitarian organizations, the United Nations, they are collecting the information, and it will be probably needed later to assess what's the situation from a legal point of view. Today, the urgency, in my opinion, is on the one hand, the humanitarian assistance. Let's make everything to deliver this humanitarian aid, including through Cyprus. The EU is working very actively with the Cypriot authorities to organize a maritime corridor to Gaza, point one. And point two, we don't give up with the two-state solution, with the political solution, because I repeat again that the only way and the best way to provide stability, security in that region, these are political negotiations. The best security guarantee is a peace treaty.
But you won't get a negotiation while people are still fighting. How far away do you think we are from seeing the international consensus change to calling for a ceasefire?
I feel that this humanitarian pauses every day, which are announced, this is a first step. But this is probably not enough, and that's why the international community will continue to work to try to be more united and to have a more positive effect in order to try to bring stability back in that region. This is difficult because we all know that this conflict has huge collateral effects in terms of polarization of our societies across the globe, including in Europe and including in our member states. And that's why we need to remain calm, to focus on what's fundamental in the short term, humanitarian assistance, point one, and the two-state solution. And I'm confident that the European Union, together with some other actors, can play a role to try to convince Israel to respect international law in its right to defend itself, point one, but also to bring the Arab countries in a process of negotiations, because the only way this is a peace treaty, a peace agreement between Israel and Palestine, and Israel and its neighbors. And that's why we need to reinforce the Palestinian Authority. We need a legitimate and credible Palestinian Authority, and the EU is consistent. We have always been supporting the Palestinian Authority, and we are ready to do more.
Charles Michel, thank you for talking to us on Sky News.
Thank you.